What if I told you that a barefoot boy from a tiny fishing village in the Philippines walked onto the America's Got Talent stage and brought back an Elvis Presley song no one expected to hear again, and by the time he finished, the entire theater was in tears? This is not just another audition. This is the moment a poor Filipino child turned a forgotten labor song into a voice the whole of America could never ignore. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe and join our family, because stories like this prove that miracles still happen. The morning Mateo Reyes left his village, the sea was restless. In a small coastal barangay outside Cebu in the Philippines, the sky was still dark when his mother shook him awake. The bamboo walls of their hut rattled softly as the wind carried the smell of salt and diesel from the fishing boats. Mateo was 12 years old, thin as a reed, with eyes that always seemed to carry both hope and worry at the same time. His father had once been the strongest fisherman in their village. But after a storm capsized his boat 3 years ago, everything changed. He survived, but his back never fully healed. Since then, Mateo helped pull nets, sort fish, and carry heavy buckets to market before school. Music was never meant to be part of his future. Survival was. Yet every night, when the lantern burned low, Mateo would sit by the shore and sing. The first time he heard Elvis Presley was through a cracked radio that belonged to an old American tourist who used to visit their village. The man, named Mr. Howard, stayed in a small nipa hut every summer. He would play old records and tell stories about Memphis, about Beale Street, about a young truck driver who became a legend. One evening, as the sun sank into the ocean, Mateo heard a song that stopped him in his tracks. It was a lesser-known labor ballad Elvis had recorded early in his career, a raw, blues-infused piece about tired hands, broken backs, and the dignity of work. The song felt like it had been written for his father. Mr. Howard noticed the boy listening from outside and invited him in. Mateo didn't understand every word, but he felt every note. From that night on, he memorized the song phonetically, singing along in secret. Mr. Howard corrected his pronunciation, explained the meaning of the lyrics, and told him something Mateo would never forget. Music is not about where you're from. It's about what you carry in your heart. 2 years later, Mr. Howard stopped coming. The villagers said he had grown too old to travel. Mateo never heard from him again. Then one day, a neighbor showed Mateo a video on a borrowed smartphone. It was an audition from America's Got Talent. The stage lights, the cheering crowd, the massive theater in Los Angeles, it looked like another universe. Mateo watched in silence as singers from all over the world stood before judges and shared their voices. That night, he sang the Elvis labor song again by the shore, but this time louder. His mother heard him and sat beside him. She had always known her son's voice was special, but she feared what dreams could do to a poor family. Dreams were expensive. Still, when Mateo whispered that he wanted to audition for America's Got Talent, she did not laugh. She only looked at the sea and said, "If God opened your voice, maybe he will open a door." The door opened in the most unexpected way. A volunteer group from Manila visited their village after a typhoon damaged several homes. Among them was a Filipino-American producer named Carla who worked as a freelance scout for international talent. On the last night of their visit, the village held a small gathering. Someone pushed Mateo forward and told him to sing. He chose the Elvis song. At first, people chatted and children ran around. But as Mateo's voice rose over the sound of waves, the crowd slowly quieted. There was something haunting about a poor Filipino boy singing a decades-old American labor song with such conviction. Carla felt goosebumps. After the performance, she asked Mateo where he learned English like that. He shyly explained about Mr. Howard and the broken radio. Carla recorded a short clip and sent it to a contact connected with America's Got Talent. Weeks passed with no response. Mateo almost gave up hope. Then one afternoon, an email arrived at the local internet cafe. It was an invitation to audition in Los Angeles. The village erupted in disbelief. But excitement quickly turned to reality. Plane tickets were impossibly expensive. Visas required paperwork they had never heard of. Mateo's father quietly suggested they forget the whole thing. That night, Mateo did not sing. The next morning, something extraordinary happened. The fishermen gathered at dawn and handed Mateo's mother a small wooden box. Inside were crumpled bills, coins, and even a few pieces of jewelry. It wasn't much by American standards, but it was everything they had. The entire village had contributed. "Your son sings for all of us," one old fisherman said. "Let him go." Through donations, help from Carla, and a small sponsorship from a Filipino community organization in California, Mateo boarded a plane for the first time in his life. Los Angeles felt unreal. The highways, the skyscrapers, the sheer size of everything overwhelmed him. When he finally stood outside the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, where America's Got Talent filmed auditions, his legs trembled. Backstage, contestants warmed up with vocal runs and flashy outfits. Some had choreographers and stylists. Mateo wore a simple white shirt and worn black shoes borrowed from a cousin in Manila. When a producer asked what he would sing, he answered softly, an Elvis Presley labor song. The producer raised an eyebrow. Elvis songs were common on talent shows. Risky. Predictable. "Are you sure?" she asked. Mateo nodded. When his name was called, the lights blinded him. He walked onto the stage, facing the judges' table and thousands of Americans who had no idea who he was. The judges smiled politely. One asked about his background. Mateo explained in halting English that he came from a small fishing village in the Philippines and that he sang for his father. There was a murmur in the audience. Then the music began. But something went wrong. The instrumental track that started playing was not the labor ballad he had rehearsed. It was a famous upbeat Elvis hit. There had been a mix-up backstage. Mateo froze. The audience chuckled, thinking it was part of the act. The judges looked confused. A stagehand rushed to stop the track, but the silence that followed felt even worse. In that terrifying moment, Mateo remembered Mr. Howard's words. "Music is not about where you're from. It's about what you carry in your heart." He took a deep breath and began singing a cappella. His voice, raw and unaccompanied, filled the theater. No music. No safety net. Just a poor Filipino boy and a decades-old labor song about sweat and dignity. The audience stopped breathing. There was grit in his tone, pain in his phrasing. When he reached the chorus, his voice cracked, not from weakness but from emotion. The crack made it real. It made it human. One judge leaned forward, eyes glistening. Another pressed a hand to her chest. By the final note, the theater was silent. Then, slowly, someone stood. Within seconds, the entire audience rose in a standing ovation. Mateo blinked back tears, unsure if he had done well or made a mistake. The first judge spoke, voice shaking, and said that in all the years on the show, he had never felt a song so deeply. Another judge said that Elvis Presley would have been proud to hear his labor anthem carried across the ocean by a boy who understood every word without living in America. Then came the twist no one expected. The head judge paused and said, "There's something you don't know." The screen behind Mateo lit up. A video message began to play. It was Mr. Howard, older, frailer, sitting in a chair with a familiar cracked radio on the table beside him. He explained that Carla had tracked him down in a nursing home in Tennessee. When he heard that Mateo was auditioning with the song he once played on the beach, he insisted on recording a message. He told Mateo that he had always believed the boy would sing for the world. He thanked him for carrying the song further than he ever could. He ended by saying, "No matter what happens tonight, you already won." Mateo collapsed into tears. The judge reached for the golden buzzer. Golden confetti rained down as the audience roared. The boy from a small fishing village stood in a storm of gold, clutching his chest as if trying to hold his heart together. But the story did not end there. As the episode aired weeks later, the performance went viral across the United States. Millions shared the clip. Comment sections filled with messages from construction workers, farmers, factory employees, people who said the song reminded them of their own tired hands. A recording studio in Nashville reached out with an offer. A scholarship program offered to fund his education. Donations poured in for his village. Then another twist emerged. Reporters discovered that the specific labor song Mateo had sung was one Elvis Presley recorded only once during a small studio session and never performed live. Music historians called Mateo's rendition one of the most emotionally authentic interpretations in decades. Back in his village, the fishermen gathered around a television powered by a generator to watch the episode. When the golden buzzer moment aired, grown men who had faced storms without fear wiped tears from their faces. Mateo returned home months later not just as a contestant, but as a symbol. He rebuilt fishing boats. He helped repair the school roof. He sang at local events, this time with confidence. When he performed in the live semifinals in America, he didn't sing Elvis. He sang an original song he wrote about the sea, blending English and Filipino lyrics. The judges praised his growth. Though he did not win the entire competition, he won something greater, a future his family never imagined. And somewhere in Tennessee, Mr. Howard watched the finals from his nursing home, smiling as the boy from the beach stood beneath American lights. Mateo's story reminds us that talent is not owned by wealth or geography. Sometimes, it rises from a bamboo hut by the ocean and crosses the world with nothing but courage and a song about hard work.